So I'm just not going to delay anymore because RJ's got so many facts to bring down. But I got to hear a huge ETL main stage welcome. You got to make some noise. You got to clap. You got to scream. Let's make some noise from RJ.
Yeah. All right. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? All good? Wonderful. If I could just have this switched over for me. Thank you so much for being here. I know it's day 2, end of the event, more or less. So thanks for taking the time to be here with me. So as the hyped up intro was said, I'm going to take you through event technology at scale, lessons learned from 3 years and about 6,500 plus events at Bloomberg. My name is RJ Crowder Schaefer. I'm the global head of product and technology for events at Bloomberg. And my team is split between 2 different areas primarily. The first one is event technology, really the people, process, and technology that's associated with the technical execution of our events. And then we have also the event system side, which is more focused on product and project management of internal event technologies, data integration, and general kind of quality assurance for our events overall. Before I dive into kind of the event technology team at Bloomberg and that specifically, I want to take you through a little bit of the business of events at Bloomberg overall. We are focused on the event execution, technology, and experience. So kind of 3 main pillars of the events program there. And Bloomberg, the events team at Bloomberg supports every single business group at Bloomberg. So we sit within marketing, we're centrally located. So however you think of Bloomberg, people often think of the company a different way. Maybe media, maybe financial services, maybe the man himself. We support events related to all of those different business areas. The event team itself is quite big. We have 100 plus team members. We do 2,000 plus events a year. This used to be a little bit higher, but we've kind of been scaling a little bit and adjusting throughout the pandemic. That is across virtual, hybrid, and in person, so all 3 event types. We do events across 60 different countries. We annually have 250,000 attendees and over 11,000 plus speakers for our events. So quite the program. I will say that the event technology team is not involved in every single one of those, but we do support that program, and we do support quite a number of the events within that. And so really, at Bloomberg, the way that we approach events is really kind of that they shape the way that people think, feel, and make sense of information. And that's a big one for us on the information side. And we do events really to create business value to support specific objectives. And that could be objectives at the company level. It could be objectives kind of at that level, but also kind of a layer lower, being more business specific. And we have kind of 4 core objectives, really. The first one is awareness. So thinking about like kind of thought leadership in general, brand recognition, and overall influence of our events and the Bloomberg brand out in the world. The second one is retention. So thinking about how we build community, increase usage within our client base, and also kind of internally focus on employee engagement, retaining talent as well. The third one is expansion. So thinking about how we can kind of create upsell or general sales opportunities through our events. And the last one is acquisition, which is really around kind of prospecting for new clients, engaging new contacts in general, and also recruiting future talent to actually come and work at Bloomberg. So across those 4 pillars, I think there's a lot that really goes into our events. And obviously, not every event is going to be focused on all 4 of these or even the subcategories that fall under those. But we definitely have to think about our events in kind of falling under one of these 4 core objectives, and then identifying the tech to use to best identify for the success of that event. And then also recognizing that connections don't happen on their own. I think all of us here recognize that. And I think really kind of thinking about how we create an unforgettable experience is across 6 different areas for us here: creativity, content, innovation, hospitality, operational excellence, and impact priorities. Sorry, this is cut off a little bit. And so when we think about our experiences at Bloomberg and for the events that we're running, we're really focused on all of these different pillars. And as I go through this session a little bit further, you start to kind of see some of the areas that we were able to kind of more easily pivot to during COVID, and some that I think took a little bit longer for us, and some that we're still honestly working through. In areas like operational excellence, for example, we were able to check many boxes in that space throughout COVID, almost initially when we had to pivot from in-person to virtual. But there were components of that we did not expect to have to accommodate for, and I'll get into that here in a little bit. All right, so before I go any further, I kind of gave you the base of events at Bloomberg in general. I want to take you through a bit more of the origin evolution of the event technology team at Bloomberg. So 2020, hopefully I don't bore you guys too much with this. I don't want to bring back any terrible memories. We were all there, we lived through it. But this was kind of my view of 2020. I don't know if you guys, anyone recognize this movie, Apollo 13? And obviously not a NASA scientist, not going to claim that by any means. But knowing that we have the tools to get something done, to get the event done and all that, but kind of can't really figure out the best way to piece them together, and having to kind of really sit down and be creative across the entire team, not just technology, but also on the execution side for the event managers and on the experience side, and thinking how we can use the tools that we have with that quick pivot to virtual to be able to put together some event that otherwise would be in person or has been in person for a number of years. And so I think, this was our view of, events and event execution pre-COVID, never a straight line. You got your ups, you got your downs, complex, but you kind of know what's going to happen. And that kind of flipped on its head, right? Back and forth, up, down. You feel like you're making progress, and then there's a wrench thrown into it. Again, I think a learning lesson for all of us. I think that we are definitely all able to better adapt now, given that, but definitely something that came quick and forced us to really rethink what we were doing. The whole kind of square peg round hole analogy here, for sure. Pre-COVID, we were doing 250 to 300 audio-only webinars, maybe 6 or so video webcasts, but we were really focused on PowerPoint presentations with audio to a small number of attendees virtually. We were running these out of any conference room in a Bloomberg office. It was scalable. We could support it fairly easy. Generally, the expectations were fairly low for these because they were so simple. Obviously, like everyone else, we had to pivot and take the technology and the platforms we were using to do that and try and make it work for 2,000 plus virtual events, given that 90% plus of our event portfolio was in person leading up to early 2020. And so I coined 2020 as a whirlwind of change. And we obviously at Bloomberg were kind of hurrying to pivot our events to virtual and in that format and kind of leveraging those providers that we had. But we also recognized that all of the providers that we were using and not using were doing the same thing. So everyone was kind of in this chaotic period of what are we doing? How are we doing it? What should we be focusing on? How do we connect speakers in from their remote location? All that stuff. We also have an approach generally at Bloomberg that we still have, which is our 80-20 approach. So we take our events and we categorize them into 3 different groups. 2 of the groups are more of a standard size. So think kind of like standard plus, and then like a custom group. The way that we're able to execute our events in the scale that we do them in is because about 80% of those events fall within the standard plus categorization, and 20% fall into that custom. That doesn't mean that any event is better than another. It's more just the complexities and how they're planned and executed. We saw that kind of flip entirely on its head. So what would have been the 20% was now that 80%, and almost every single event that we were doing was kind of had to be taken or planned from a custom perspective, just leveraging some of those standards that we had in place. And also, as you guys are all very well aware, while our event complexity increased, so did the expectations of our stakeholders. So, no longer do we have the month, 2 months, 3 months of lead time for an event. It was, hey, I want to do an event on Monday and it's a Wednesday, and having to be able to manage those expectations at the same time deliver on them and do it in a way that works for everyone. I think also kind of thinking about the themes that we saw in 2020 was our event attendees and speakers were required to use technology in general, maybe not used it all before, but also for the most part, unfamiliar technologies, which, again, depending on what the event is, the focus area, the audience, the speakers, that could be anything from someone who's maybe in the media space and very tech savvy to someone that's in financial services and really never thinks about events or does events, but was invited to be a part of one for us. We also have speakers joining from home and remote locations. I mean, that's one that's still sticking around, right? And also this idea that the facade between the office building and the home office was torn down. So previously, as mentioned, we did 200, 250, 300 audio-only webinars before the pandemic. That was intentional. I mean, my thought candidly on that then, I should say, was that not every event needs to be on camera. You can still find value with the audio and have people focus on kind of the content that's on the screen. That was totally removed, and you got kind of situations like this very well-known one. But, we got used to seeing people presenting from their kid's bedroom or their bedroom, or, we had people presenting from Hawaii with, chickens and things in the background. Like, you name it, we dealt with it. And also, obviously, the complexities of testing a speaker in one location and then having them by surprise be somewhere else. Like a cruise ship, for example, which, big surprise, the connectivity wasn't that great. And then lastly, we'll move on from 2020, hopefully forever, but lastly, this question that we continued to get from a lot of our stakeholders, which was, why don't we just use Zoom for everything? I think that there's obvious reasons for that for us. First and foremost, I think we want our events, whether they're kind of more templated from the execution perspective or not, to feel bespoke, to feel important to the end user. And I think one good thing about Zoom is that it's widely used by almost everyone. You're familiar with it. But when you join an event, you want it to feel special. You want it to feel like you're joining something that is not accessible by everyone. That's kind of invite only in that sense. And that was one of the major reasons for that. But we realized that we were getting this question because of issues that we were running into with our platforms. And so I'll get into this a little bit further, but we kind of peeled back the layers and dissected, all right, why are we getting this question so much, and how can we kind of integrate this into our stack and make it work? 2021. We've started to focus a little bit more on our support model. So 2020 scrambled, got our platforms in place, our tech stack more or less in place. And now we need to kind of figure out, how do we support this in a way that is scalable and provides our end users with the level of customer service and support that they expect from Bloomberg. So thinking about what we had then was pretty much an outsourced model for support that was platform-based. And so what we were seeing with that was inconsistent support across our events, regions, et cetera, inability to transfer insight or knowledge across events, especially regions and whatnot within there. Unfortunately, those annoying kind of avoidable human errors, checkboxes not being done, an ID not being in the right field, so the integration wasn't working. Those things, when you look back, caused a lot of issues downstream that would have been very simple to avoid. And then also generally, like I mentioned before, misalignment with Bloomberg support standards, and really kind of us having clients and prospects joining our events, expecting a level of customer service that they might get from the sales side or Bloomberg customer service in general, and not getting that with events. And so what we decided to do in 2021 was create 2 internal roles and really build out the event technology team from what it was with 2 people, myself and my colleague Dana, who's here, into a team of 13 people, I guess 15 total if you include us. Those 2 roles were the digital event technologist, really responsible for managing the success of our events from the technical perspective, fully end-to-end in that sense. And we've kind of started to expand the support areas. And also a quality assurance specialist, which I don't think I've seen really in the event space in an official capacity. I kind of plucked this from the product management space and thinking, all right, we have all these events that we're running. We have all these different platforms and sites and pages being built. We need a team of people to go through these for every single event and make sure everything is set correctly. We're all human, we all make mistakes, but let's try and catch them as much as possible. So we did that as well. And that approach was also phased. So recognizing that what you have set up maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks out from an event is going to be different than what you're adding maybe 48 hours to an event, and then what you're doing post the event. So reviewing those events at different stages as well. This is just a quick org of the team as it is now. So you can see, I guess, emphasizing here really that it is kind of focused on the global support that we need to provide our organization. We have TLs in each region, and then also event technicians that fall within each region to make sure that we have support for the events that we have within those local time zones. With the evolution of our support model and bringing all that support in-house, we really were able to implement a follow the sun model, which is something that Bloomberg does for almost every component of its customer service at the company. And for us, it has been really helpful for a few different reasons. One, obviously availability across multiple time zones, that's a big one. We'll often do events that might be like hosted out of New York, but have speakers that are in Hong Kong or speakers that are in continental Europe. And thinking about, how do we support those when that speaker can only do a pre-record at a certain time that's atrocious for New York hours and kind of vice versa. Faster response and delivery times was big for us. We were, smaller things or, generally smaller things like, video processing. So an event happens, you record it, you put it on demand. We were looking at kind of a week lead time as a standard for us. And that wasn't acceptable in my opinion. And without kind of having to break my back kind of going through and doing those myself, which I did do for a number of months, this team was essentially able to, run an event in New York that ended at 6 p.m., hand off that content to the team in Asia who's just coming online, have them do the top tail editing, whatever else, and then get that content uploaded to the different channels, so that we were looking at something that used to take a week, scaled that down to 2 days, and now we're at about 5 or 6 hours, if not faster, which is really great for a dozen or so events a day sometimes. Knowledge handoffs, really big for me, and kind of the evolution of this. We have global calls with the team. We're aligned on our baseline. Everyone knows the standards that are expected from a support perspective. And we're able to then also account not only for global consistency there, but also regional consistency, because obviously different nuances there. All right, 2022. So we have our technologies in place, again, always evolving, but a baseline there. We have our support that's really kind of cruising along. 2022, we focused really on kind of owning our back-end production workflow. A big one here for us was the launch of what we call the Bloomberg Digital Control Room. This is our kind of proprietary take on a master control room, if you're familiar with that in broadcast. And what that did, our approach with that was really to decouple our back-end production from the front-end user experience. So previous to that, we're using our different platforms. We were leveraging their proprietary back-end studios, often browser-based, and continue to see a number of issues with those systems for us. Not always, but enough to be like, what's going on here? How do we solve this? So this allowed us to decouple that. We could start to think about the production side separate from that front-end user attendee side. And then also give us full control of event production and allow us to get as close as possible to Bloomberg TV and what the look and feel is there. We're still working on that. We're not quite there. But I think generally speaking, when someone looks at an event, at least from our perspective, they're expecting to see the same quality production as they might see if they were to turn on Bloomberg TV or any news network or any kind of live broadcast. And so being able to lean in on our own production, that could be anything from moving backgrounds to animated overlays, like very simple things, but really things that elevate that experience and make everything look really professional. And then lastly, the enhanced speaker experience. So one of the key things for us with this model was that we allowed our speakers to join the event to speak using any collaboration tool that they want. So if someone wanted to use Zoom, they could use Zoom. If they wanted to use Teams, so on and so forth. And so that really allowed us to get around corporate firewalls, government firewalls. Tech checks were much easier, have been much easier. I'm talking about like it's in the past. It's very much in the present too. Tech checks are easier because everyone is familiar with the platform and know that it works because they use it all the time, so on and so forth. So that really solved, one, that question of why don't we use Zoom for everything, but also started to really allow us to provide the user experience that we were missing on that speaker side. I'll talk a little bit more about that too. And then also in 2022, we started to scale out our support. And so we were kind of already providing digital production across certain platforms. We've extended that out to all platforms and all event formats. Focus on engagement platforms and technology. So, your mobile apps and other things on site that our attendees are using. Accessibility is a big one for us. So leveraging the technology that we have, but also figuring out the best way to implement it at scale across different, in a Bloomberg office, event space, outside, large space, small space, all those different things. Quality control and review is a big one for us still. I talked about that before. Technical scoping generally, as well as coordination with third-party production companies. So we're not running, the AV for every single event that we're doing. Our larger events, especially those that are offsite, are leveraging third-party production. If they're on-site, we have an internal AV team that supports all of the event spaces. So as a part of our work in 2022, really bringing the team in at the ground level to make sure that we're being advised or advising rather on what's being done, why, and how we can help influence that. All right, 2023, here we are. So just quickly kind of determining how the dust settles and kind of what we're focusing on right now before I get into my much anticipated lessons learned is really right now we're focused on reassessing incumbent technology. So understanding that, I'm not saying what we have right now doesn't work, it obviously is working, but what we solved for in 2020 is very different or could be very different than what we're solving for now. So what does that look like for us and not just this year, but also beyond? Filling gaps in our tech stack. So again, looking for scalable global solutions to specific needs. A couple that come to mind, badge printing, attendee engagement in custom registration pages. We're doing all these things now, but thinking about kind of finding again, one, checking that it's what we're doing right now is what makes sense for us, but also thinking about the scale, finding the different categories that we can slot these different areas into to make sure that we have consistency across events between regions, countries, et cetera. And then also, what I'm really excited about is finding time to explore more. This is the one thing that kind of continuously gets kicked down the road for us when more tactic-focused things come into play. And that's just finding opportunities to test and pilot the fun stuff out there, experiential technology, and kind of how we can overall enhance user experience, but also do it in a way not just to do it, find value in the different technologies that are out there to be able to kind of keep the Bloomberg event program as best in class. All right, so before I go on any further, I want a few acknowledgements. One, I think the success of the event technology team is very much due to the global events team overall. It's, as I mentioned, it's over 100 people, a ton of events that we do. And I think that our partnership with our event managers and our experience team has really allowed us to not only have the success and kind of come out of the COVID years somewhat sane, but also really help us kind of continue to keep that best-in-class experience for Bloomberg. And then also I want to just caveat, moving forward, that I recognize that the Bloomberg Events program is quite large from a volume perspective, might be unique in that sense to some of you here. The team size is on the larger side. So I've done my best to kind of outline these lessons learned in a way that I hope is applicable to teams of any size, budget, all of that. Cool? All right. So after all of that, what have we learned? So the first one is know your audience. Now, I want to ask, who woke up this morning and was like, who's speaking today? Oh, this guy RJ's speaking. I wonder if he's going to show a slide with sliced red onion. Anyone? Probably not. All right, cool. Oh, Dana does because she knew. Yeah. And so this really, know your audience for me, I think is something that we all generally know already, but I think that we kind of lost sight of in a way, at least from the Bloomberg side, when it came to our virtual events. This here represents to me the classic in-person experience. And what I mean by that is, who's coming to your event, how they segment or how they fall within, the event audience itself, speaker, attendee, what type of speaker. They come on site, you're able to greet them. You can take, someone to a green room. You can take someone to, a bilateral meeting or a one-on-one networking, whatever it might be. And you generally know kind of what they're there for, what their vibe is, where they fall into kind of your objectives for that event. And it's, again, that in-person experience is really kind of made for that, right? And I think what we fell into with COVID and virtual is this. Like, this was our audience here. We knew that there was layers in there, but we couldn't exactly see what was in there. And I think a large part of that was due to technology and kind of, at least, again, speaking from the Bloomberg perspective, and understanding kind of how we were able to segment our audience within an existing platform itself. We found ourselves, at least in the early days, and still sometimes now, with the audience just kind of grouped into as one big audience that everyone has the same exact experience. And we haven't been able to kind of provide that unique touch, that white glove service that we typically are able to in person. And so I think what we saw kind of coming out of that, like end of 2020 or early 2021 rather, was starting to think about our audience in just three big buckets, at least to start, instead of one big bucket. And again, this is general. You can kind of segment further as you need to. But one is attendee, speaker, and business stakeholder. And I say that, and you're all probably thinking in your head, like, yeah, duh, of course, that's who we need to think about for an event. But I think that it's important to think about that as it relates to each individual event that you're doing, and also thinking about the different workflows and technologies that each of these groups is going to be involved with. I mentioned before the question about, why don't we use Zoom for everything? And what we realized and what led to the development of the digital control rooms was that question was coming from the speaker experience. We were killing it on the attendee side. Our audiences were happy. They could join. They saw the content. They asked questions. Amazing. Business stakeholders, great. The internal events team is well-versed in how to work with our stakeholders, what they need, all of that. But it was the speakers that were really kind of hitting a wall when it came to connecting, being able to kind of see and hear. I have some horror stories that I'd rather not bring up around that, but kind of that general frustration of, I was on the platform, I tested yesterday, everything was good, and now I'm here for the event, and you can't hear me, or I can't hear you, I can't see you, like, what platform is this? Why are we using this? Who are you? Why are, all that stuff. And so thinking about these different groups allowed us to really take charge of our planning experience and allowed us to really start to think through kind of, again, what technology, what workflow and support structure was in place for each of these, which really helped us in the long run there. The second one is owning your event technology stack. So what do I mean by that? Generally speaking, let me just dive into this. This was our event tech stack in 2019. This was at least how we thought of it generally as a company, right? Virtual event platforms, that's it. Not much else there. Obviously, there were registration sites and integrations and the Bloomberg terminal and all of that. But when it came to thinking about event technology, it's just virtual events. We still see that a little bit. It's a work in progress, I think, for my team. But what we've done over the past 3 years is really start to not only build out the stack itself, make it more robust to fit our needs, but also start to educate the team around what our stack is and how we should think about it. And this is how we view it today. So we have kind of our 6 pillars rather. One would be core digital platforms. So that's going to be essentially somewhat synonymous with virtual event platforms, but a little bit different here. We have our secondary digital platforms, collaboration solutions, Zoom, Teams, etc. Our event engagement, mobile apps, digital production, the back-end digital control rooms, or really any production, StreamYard, those types of things, and also accessibility. Now, there's a lot of different levels within this, but this group of 6 here has really allowed us to start to get our stakeholders to think about event technology as kind of a more robust system where things need to be kind of cherry-picked across different groups in order to make that event successful. So I think thinking about kind of how we pivoted, this really is night and day to me. And I think it's really important for you all, if you haven't done so already, to think about like, what does this look like for you? You know, what is your organization, like how do they view event technology? How do they view the event tech stack? How do you start to kind of pick what are your primary categories? What do you care about the most? What needs to be included here? And figure out a way to kind of align those. And then from there, again, if you haven't done this already, think about who you're currently using and start to put them into those categories. And I think one, that'll help you organize your thoughts and kind of your discussions with stakeholders and around planning. But also, I think it might identify some gaps that you might have. It definitely has for us. So this one's been really helpful. The third one here, which also could be confused as the 8th one, that's my fault, is keep it familiar. So what technologies are you using to engage across your audience, and are these technologies familiar? I don't necessarily mean using the same technology over and over and over again, or using the same technology that some other large corporation is using just because of volume and all of that. I think more around user experience, product development, user interface, for example. I think we've seen this come out a lot more in the last few years, where you're seeing platforms that look kind of like Facebook or look kind of like Instagram. And I think that's something that is important to think about, and definitely one thing that I would recommend kind of the direction that you go in. But I don't want to mistake this as make everything look the same. It's more about kind of those small little touches here that allow an attendee to focus on the content and focus on how they can engage, and less on, oh, this looks weird. Where am I? What are the pages? Like, how do I get here? All those different things. And so kind of going back to that speaker experience for us, that was, as I mentioned before, one thing that we identified as unfamiliar for most of our speakers. Unless you're active in the events circuit as a speaker, you're probably not going to know most of the platforms that are out there. They're all going to be new to you, right? You might know the Zoom and all that stuff, but you're not going to know some of the other players in the space. And so what we saw was that our speakers, were unfamiliar with the platform and the general user interface as well. We also had a number of our backend studios for speakers that were browser-based or more or less a WebRTC connection. And so we saw issues with, you load a page, you get a little pop-up that says allow, you're quick, you're used to click and deny. When you get the pop-up for other sites, you click block, and then we have to spend 5 minutes taking you through the instructions on how to re-enable that, right? And sometimes we wouldn't be able to figure it out for some reason. So troubleshooting technical issues with audio and video. We work with a lot of different corporations, governments. We find that each one have their own firewalls and restrictions. Sometimes we would, do a tech check of a speaker at home, and then they would be surprised in the office the next day. Things wouldn't work. Limited fallback options for redundancy purposes. And then also, I think generally like less sophisticated production options. This has gotten way better, I think, from the platform side. But still, if I could say at least a year or two ago, if you look at something like Bloomberg TV and then you pull up one of our events, there's a mismatch there. And it may never be perfect, but it was far enough where it was noticeable for us. And so what we did, as I mentioned before, we created the digital control room. And the big one here that I'll highlight, besides all the stuff that I mentioned before, was that it allowed our speakers to join an event using any collaboration tool of their choice. And this also, I think, really important for us from a scalability perspective was we could support this. We could run this show from any location. So there is a physical footprint we actually have 3 of these systems set up. There's a physical footprint of these that are on the West Coast in LA, but they're set up in a way that the event techs on my team can remote into them and using Stream Decks execute any show as if they were sitting right next to that equipment itself. Really important for us, obviously, because we did not see the need to, or the desire really, to have these located in all the major hubs. Our team is spread out across different countries and all of that, and this wasn't realistic for us to have it that way. So that remote access and the ability to produce remotely was a big one for us. And so as a speaker, instead of seeing something like this when I join, which is a backend of one of our platforms that I'm not talking down on at all. I know this backend very well because I've been in here thousands of times. But if you're new to an event, or new to this platform as a speaker rather, this is going to be something that's extremely overwhelming to you when you're trying to focus on the content itself, and maybe you're already nervous about speaking and all of that. So instead of seeing this, I would instead see something like this, which probably looks a lot more familiar to you guys. And I'll give you a real life example. This is a test that we did before launch, but we're on Zoom, right? Like this, I know how to control things. I can share my screen, I can stop my video, all that stuff. And so what we were able to do is provide the speaker with this look and feel, customizing certain things like the return feeds and all of that, but send the output, which is this one here, to the front end platform rather, for our attendees to be able to view. So this was one that we launched pretty early on with the digital control room. This is on the Notified platform. So you can see we were able to send the single speaker feed through, produce it into kind of a 5-box shot there, do overlays, all of that stuff. So as the attendee, this is what I would have seen before. Maybe these speakers would have been able to connect without issue, maybe not, but we were able to ensure that they were able to have a great experience in that case. This was actually the first one we ran through the digital control room. And this speaker here, Carol Massler, is actually a news personality at Bloomberg. And so we ran our first one with a news anchor who's used to all the fancy equipment and all the expensive studios that Bloomberg has. And she thought it was amazing. She was like, that was so easy. And I'm like, that's the idea. I don't necessarily want to amaze you. I want you to be able to join this event and speak and do all of that and just be like, that was great, no problem. And so we've kind of been working on enhancing this. This is back in May 2022. But more or less, that's the idea there. And one that has really solved a lot of headaches for us. I'm probably going to jinx myself. I want to knock on wood, but we've had 0 issues with speaker connectivity, at least outside of their own bandwidth issues that we can't always control. But it's worked really well for us. Just to go on through this a little bit further, just to really kind of give you guys the full details. So the step here is really, there's 6 steps. So 1, the speaker joins the collaboration platform. We typically recommend something like Zoom. The speaker is greeted by an event tech. When the event's ready to start, the event tech initiates a broadcast that then sends out the stream to whatever endpoints that we want to hit. The speaker starts delivering their content. The event tech operates that through the Stream Decks there. That's a Bloomberg keyboard in an office with Stream Decks. And then on the front end, the view, as I mentioned before, is all the same. So really, again, straightforward and easy for us to do in this sense. And then lastly, I'll just kind of, to kind of finish up here, is thinking about kind of the digital control room solving for one problem that we had on the speaker side, but actually, I guess, to our surprise in a sense, giving us kind of surprise flexibility beyond just that, just the speaker issues that we were having. So again, leveraging the collaboration solutions for our speaker connections, emphasize 0 issues there, and also really check the box for us on that question of why not using Zoom for everything. And then kind of the secondary surprise solution or benefits were we now have a centralized distribution hub for all of our video content. So before, if we wanted to send something from, let's say, one of the platforms to social, we'd have to put all the keys in on the backend platform. If we wanted to hit Bloomberg.com and stream there, we'd have to bring in a third-party provider. Now from the digital control room, we can, with more or less a click of a button, send out to whatever endpoints that we want to hit. And that's been really helpful for us, especially for on-site events or in-person events, I should say, that are leveraging third-party production companies. Before, we'd have to work with them to say, hey, we need to hit these endpoints. They'd have to bring in certain encoders and all of that. Now we can say, hey, send us a stream and we'll manage the rest from there. So the in-person AV company is managing the in-person experience and all the content capture, but we're really owning that content delivery. Elevated production standards, expanded accessibility controls, because we're able to put the layer of accessibility at kind of the beginning of the production itself instead of at the end. And also really enhancing our run of show standards from kind of a scene development and production perspective overall. Cool. You guys bored yet? Still with me? Okay, cool. So the fourth one here is hone your product management skills. You might be saying, I'm not a product manager. I don't want to be a product manager. I'm an event technologist, or I'm whatever I am in the events. But I think with my background in product management that I've had so far, I see a lot of similarities to event technology in general. And the biggest one, I think, is really serving as the bridge between the technical and the non-technical. That's really important. And I don't think that as an event technologist that we're meant to be fully technical. I've gone with the old approach of surrounding myself with people that are smarter than me on my team. So people that have 20 plus years of experience in AV, et cetera. I don't have that, but I think generally speaking, understanding how to speak kind of both sides as best possible is really important for event technology, and also crosses over and aligns with the product management space, where you're working with engineering on one side to translate the requests that you've received from the business stakeholders into that, and being able to kind of then take what they've done and translate it back into the business side. Really crucial. Also, this idea of Scrum Agile methodology, I don't know if anyone's familiar with this in general, but thinking about execution in general as an iterative approach, and really focusing on what your minimum viable product is, your MVP. We often, with our events in the past, and still I think in a number of ways, get requests that are massive. They really want to kind of boil the ocean in that sense. And our job within the event technology team, in collaboration with our event managers and our experiential team, is really to kind of understand of that ask, what are you trying to solve for? What is the challenge that you're experiencing? Or what experience are you trying to give to your attendee? Understand the why there, and then start to think about, okay, of this massive request, what parts of it do we actually need to do in order to achieve our MVP focus area? And I think that's, if we're talking scale, this is a really big one here, because you can get distracted and go in a million different directions when it comes to certain requests. And I always come down to just because we can do it doesn't mean we should do it. And kind of pulling that down a bit further, thinking about what we should do, what within that should we really do, if that makes sense. All right, I am almost out of time. That was fast. All right, so focus on data segmentation. So a big one for us was really, we have to collect data, all this data, and what we found was really kind of a couple core areas of data that our stakeholders really cared about: registration, attendees, conversion, questions asked, polling responses, more or less, and then splitting that out into supplemental data for us. So the length and type of the attendance, on demand versus live, dwell time, technical feedback, heat mapping, experiential engagement, and starting to think about how we can leverage supplemental data to then enhance our event execution, our setup, the technology that we're using, and so on and so forth. So, I don't know where everyone here kind of sits with data. I often think that we are trying to provide more data than not. I think more data is good, but thinking about kind of what the core set of data is and how you can leverage some of the kind of more ancillary supplemental data sets to continue to develop the technology as you see fit. I think also data in general needs to be segmented by event type. What you're collecting and how you're analyzing data for virtual is going to be different than in person. Again, hybrid is a big one for us right now, but I think it is an imperative for ourselves, and I'm assuming for most people here, to really continue to show the true value of hybrid events. It's more complex to do a hybrid event than not. I mean, how much more complex is going to depend on a number of different factors, but with that complexity and with that cost does come a lot of benefits, right? Especially the reach on not only the attendee side, but also the speaker side. I think using the data to show the value of that is going to be really important as the world tries to move back into what's familiar, right? Like, we went out of our comfort zone, and I think everyone wants to get back into that comfort zone, but I think it's changed a little bit, and I think it's going to be interesting for us and compelling for us to leverage data in order to continue to show that value. Number 6, push vendors to think outside of the box. So generally, I recommend engaging with technology providers that are open to feedback and product collaboration. Pretty straightforward. I think gone are the days of here's the product. It is what it is. Take it or leave it. That's gone. Work with providers and engage with providers that are constantly enhancing their product, that give you visibility and input on their product roadmap, and also are generally focused on innovation and kind of providing best-in-class service. This is definitely something that we're leading with, and very much how we kind of approach our potential vendors when it comes to different areas. One quick example of this was with our partner Notified. So we traditionally, for our kind of shorter format events that are about 30 minutes long, 30 to 60 minutes long, we would have a registration page. Someone registers, they get an email, they could get a reminder, they come back 5 minutes before, they sit there in silence, the event starts, the attendees shocked, the speaker's shocked, and then the event happens, and then it's over, and they get an email saying thank you, and that's it. What we wanted to do was really kind of encourage, give the audience an outlet for engaging with content outside of that actual delivery period itself. And so we did that through a product called the Lobby Experience that we actually designed and built in collaboration with our vendor partner here, that allows our attendees to actually hit a pre-event lobby as soon as they register. They can see a countdown clock, pre-roll video, different assets, ask questions ahead of time, fill out surveys, really kind of anything that you can think of there. Again, nothing groundbreaking here, but something that we didn't have before that this partner of ours was willing to work with us and build out. And then also post-event, be able to send someone automatically once the event finishes to a page that says thank you. It really kind of ties a bow on the event experience overall for some of these more simpler, straightforward events. All right, I'm going to move quickly because I'm out of time. But number 7 is develop categories that make sense to your stakeholders. So this is a general, I think, kind of going back to that product management approach, thinking how can you explain the technical and the non-technical to both sides? One big one for us was thinking about technology from a content capture and content delivery perspective, and also the back end and the front end. Some more examples of that here I'll skip through. Number 8, document everything. Compound your lessons learned. We found that especially with some of our global series, we would do an event in Hong Kong and then an event in New York 2 weeks later and be like, wait, how did we do that? And who did that? So just document everything in general. Pilot technologies in stages. I think the takeaway here is really focus on your core user experience and start to inject parts of different technologies into that, but don't screw with the core too much. Make sure that that's first and foremost the focus, and then kind of iterate from there. And then lastly, very quickly, is to lead with a solution-oriented growth mindset. I think we probably all do here. I think we've had to over the past 3 years, but really this idea of continuing to embrace and view challenges as opportunities, learning and growing from failures. Upskilling, I think, is a big one, especially in technology, knowing what's out there, knowing how you can support it, continue to kind of keep that technical acumen up to date. And then also looking for opportunities beyond existing needs, a bit more proactive versus reactive. With that, I'll say thank you. I know I'm at time. I went through that.
No, you're good. I was letting you just keep going, man. That was like, can we get a big round of applause? Oh my gosh, so amazing.
Thank you.
So I do want to try to fit one more question. We're going to bleed a little bit over time.
Sure,
I think you got a couple minutes.
Yeah.
So Rodney actually asked in the audience about gated versus ungated content. And you guys are like a powerhouse of content. Like as a publisher, you're just literally putting out articles and articles. When do you guys decide gated versus ungated? And do you see ungated kind of becoming the trend, or are you guys seeing success in gating content?
The majority of our event content is gated. We want to get your information before we give you information, if that makes sense. But I think a big one for us is having a kind of going back to the audience segmentation, knowing who you want to be, whose information you want, generally speaking, and then providing them a certain experience because they've given you that information. So developing events, again, kind of across different endpoints, but developing in a sense that you give the end user a reason to provide their information. Maybe it's the ability to ask questions or engage with polling or whatever that might be. And then also, kind of hitting just the general audience in the world, streaming to Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn and stuff like that. So that's typically how we've thought about it. But we feel like that's probably a good place for us right now because there is so much content out there that we want to make these experiences as bespoke as possible, but also be able to hit those people that might be just on Twitter, by happenstance and want to watch a little bit of the content.
I love it. I love it. RJ, where can people go to follow you to keep this amazing journey that you have had and just continue to learn from you?
Oh, sure. I think just LinkedIn generally. Connect, please. I'll be here for a little bit longer, so come chat if you'd like. But yeah,
Amazing. You guys, one more time. You guys give it up for RJ.
Thank you.